Preparing for SOC 2 is stressful enough, but what if you miss an important document and fail your audit? Most SaaS companies don't know exactly what's required or how to organize it all, and that's where things fall apart. My name's Christian Khoury. I've helped those same companies save over 600 hours of manual work by breaking down exactly which SOC 2 documents they need, how to structure them, and how to keep everything audit ready. In this video, I'll walk you through the must-have SOC 2 documents, which ones auditors actually care about, and the biggest mistakes that could cost you compliance. And if you're tired of doing this manually, stick around and I'll show you how to use AI to automate the hardest parts so you can focus on growing your business instead of drowning in paperwork. Let's get started. SOC 2 documentation is your proof that you take security seriously. It's a collection of policies, processes, and evidence that shows auditors and your customers that you've got your data security together. Without it, you're just hoping your auditor takes your word for it, and that's not gonna fly. This documentation is what makes or breaks your audit. As long as you get it right, you're smooth sailing. If you get it wrong, you're looking at months of delays, extra costs, and worst case, failing the audit altogether. And failing means losing out on deals with big enterprise customers because they won't even consider working with you if you're not SOC 2 compliant. Now, if you're not using a tool like Easy Audit that can automatically generate these documents for you in seconds, you're gonna have to manually piece all this together. When it comes to SOC 2 compliance, there are 3 critical documents that every company needs to have in place. These aren't just paperwork for the sake of paperwork. They're the backbone of your audit, the proof that your security measures exist, and the first thing an auditor will look at. First is your system description, which is a breakdown of how your systems work and how you protect customer data. Next is a management assertion, which is a formal statement from leadership confirming your security controls. And lastly is a control matrix, which is a detailed map of your security measures and how they align with SOC 2 requirements. If you don't have these, you're not ready for an audit. And if they're not done right, you're looking at delays, extra costs, and possible non-compliance. So first, I'll cover the system description. This explains everything about what your company does and how your systems operate. Auditors use it to understand your infrastructure, data flow, and security controls. It's the foundation of your SOC 2 report. It should include a company overview, right? What your business does and who your customers are. System components, right? So servers, databases, cloud platforms, and any software that you're using. And your service commitments, any uptime guarantees, SLAs, or security promises that you make to your clients. For example, if your company guarantees 99.9% uptime, this document should detail exactly how that's achieved, whether it's through backups, load balancing, monitoring, you name it. Next, I'll cover the management assertion. This is, again, a formal statement from leadership confirming that your security controls exist and are functioning as intended. Auditors don't just take your word for it, they compare this statement against your actual security practices to verify if it's accurate. This document should reference a summary of your security controls, a statement on your security objectives, such as ensuring customer data confidentiality and availability, and evidence that your controls align with the SOC 2 Trust Services criteria. If this document is inaccurate or incomplete, the audit will uncover discrepancies which could lead to compliance failure. Accuracy is everything. And now the control matrix. So this is a structured map of your security controls and how they align with SOC 2 requirements. It acts as a checklist for auditors to quickly understand how you're meeting compliance standards. This document should include the control number, so a unique identifier for each security measure, the control activity, which is a description of what the control does, like multi-factor authentication for logins. It should have the risk level, which is how critical the control is to security, categorized as low, medium, or high, and the responsible team, so the department or individual accountable for the control, like IT, HR, or operations. For example, a password policy that requires multi-factor authentication and 90-day password rotations would be mapped under access controls within the security TSC. These 3 documents form the foundation of SOC 2 compliance. They don't just help you pass the audit, they make the entire process more efficient. They provide structured, clear evidence for auditors, which reduces the back and forth questions significantly, which saves you a lot of time. They keep your security measures organized and documented, so you're not scrambling at the last minute. And they ensure alignment with compliance standards, which reduces the risk of delays or outright failure. If these documents are missing, incomplete, or poorly written, your audit will be painful. But if they're done right, the process becomes much easier and you'll be on your way to securing bigger deals with enterprise clients. Next, we'll break down exactly what documentation is required for each department, from IT security to HR policies. These policies don't just help with audits, they ensure that your team knows exactly how to handle security across your organization. So here are the most important policies you'll need to have in place. First is an an access control policy. Who gets access to what? This policy defines who can access sensitive data and systems. It should follow the principle of least privilege, which means employees only get access to what they need to do their job. It also requires regular access reviews to remove old or unnecessary accounts, and it should cover how new employees are granted access and how access is revoked when somebody leaves the company. Without this policy, access management becomes a mess, leaving your company open to unauthorized access and security breaches. Next is the incident response policy. What happens if there's a breach? A breach is inevitable. It's about how you respond to it that matters. This policy defines how security incidents are detected, reported, and handled. It assigns clear roles and responsibilities for incident response, and it requires post-incident reviews to understand what went wrong and how to prevent future attacks. Without this, your team will be scrambling in the event of a security incident, which increases the damage and the downtime. Next is a data retention and destruction policy. How long do you store data and how do you delete it? Not all data should be kept forever. This policy specifies how long customer data is retained before deletion. It defines secure disposal methods to prevent leaks, and it ensures compliance with data privacy laws and contractual obligations. Failing to delete old data properly can lead to data breaches, legal fines, and compliance violations. Next is a change management policy. How do you handle software updates? Changes to your systems, whether software updates or infrastructure changes, must be controlled. This policy requires testing and approval before making system changes. It defines a rollback plan if an update causes problems, and it ensures that all changes are documented for accountability. Without this, unapproved or untested changes can break systems or introduce security vulnerabilities. You also need a risk management policy. How do you identify and reduce security risks? Every company faces risks, and this policy ensures they are proactively managed. It requires regular risk assessments to identify threats, outlines a process for mitigating high-risk areas, and it ensures security vulnerabilities are documented and fixed. Skipping risk management means you'll always be in reactive mode, dealing with security threats only after they happen. You also want a vendor management policy. How do you evaluate third-party security? Third-party vendors often have access to your data. This policy makes sure that they also meet security standards. So the policy should define how vendors are assessed before they handle your data. It should require third-party audits and compliance reports, and it makes sure that vendors meet your security policies and industry standards. Neglecting vendor security can lead to breaches through weak third-party systems, so this is very important. Let's also cover the security awareness and training policy. Are employees trained on security best practices? Security is everyone's responsibility, not just the IT teams. This policy requires all employees to receive security training on best practices. It covers phishing awareness, password management, and incident reporting. And it also ensures new employees complete training before gaining access to sensitive systems. Companies that skip security training are far more vulnerable to social engineering attacks and employee-related breaches. Next, you'll need a backup and recovery policy. What happens if your system goes down? Every company needs a plan for data loss and outages. This policy ensures data is backed up regularly and stored securely. It requires a disaster recovery plan for restoring systems after a failure, and it defines who is responsible for maintaining backups. Without a backup plan, a server crash, a cyber attack, or an accidental deletion could mean permanent data loss. These policies aren't just for compliance. They do ensure your company operates securely and efficiently. If they're missing, outdated, or poorly implemented, your SOC 2 audit will be painful, and worse, you'll be exposed to real security risks. But a policy is only as good as its execution. If it's unclear, vague, or outdated, it's useless. SOC 2 policies need to be clear, specific, and actionable so that employees know exactly what's expected of them and auditors can easily verify your compliance. Here's how to write policies that actually work. Policies should be written in plain language with step-by-step instructions. Too often, companies create policies filled with vague statements that leave way too much room for interpretation. So I'll give you an example. Instead of writing access must be granted only to authorized personnel, write something specific and enforceable, like access to production systems is granted by the IT manager after a formal request is submitted via the help desk ticketing system and approved by the employee's direct manager. See how much of a difference there is there? The second version makes it clear who is responsible, how access is granted, and what process to follow. A good policy eliminates confusion. Employees shouldn't have to guess what they mean, and auditors should be able to quickly verify compliance by checking logs and approvals. So wherever possible, include specific tools, responsible parties, and required approvals to make policies immediately actionable. Policies are easier to follow when they include real-world examples. So instead of just listing abstract rules, show how they work in action. Take an incident response policy for phishing attempts. Instead of saying employees should report phishing emails immediately, a stronger and more actionable version would be the following. If a phishing email is detected, the employee forwards it to the IT security team. IT security investigates and blocks the sender within 2 hours. If an employee clicks a phishing link, IT initiates a forensic investigation and documents the finding within 24 hours. Again, massive difference. With clear steps, employees know exactly what to do, and auditors can easily verify if these steps were followed by checking email logs, incident reports, and IT security actions. Including real-world scenarios makes policies easier to apply in daily operations and ensures security protocols are actually followed instead of just being written down. Naming a specific owner for each policy creates accountability. If something goes wrong, like an access review not being done, there's a clear point of responsibility. Without assigning owners, policies tend to get outdated, ignored, or inconsistently applied, leading to major compliance gaps. But policies are not static. As systems, technologies, and security threats evolve, your policies must evolve too. A big mistake in SOC 2 compliance is having policies that no longer reflect how things actually work. For example, if a company migrates to the cloud, the data retention policy needs updating to include cloud storage locations instead of on-premise servers. It has to account for new backup processes that apply to cloud services, and it should revise data destruction procedures to reflect cloud deletion practices. Policies should be reviewed at least annually, with a version history to track changes over time, a change log explaining why updates were made, and approval from policy owners before publishing updates. If an auditor sees a policy hasn't been updated in years, they'll question whether your company is truly following security best practices. Keeping your policies up to date makes sure that they remain relevant, useful, and compliant. Next, let's cover how to organize and maintain your SOC 2 documentation so that everything is always audit ready and centralized. Poorly managed documentation leads to delays, confusion, and unnecessary back and forth with your auditor. Here's how to structure your SOC 2 documentation to ensure security, accessibility, and version control. First, you could use a cloud-based repository. Storing SOC 2 documentation in a centralized cloud-based repository ensures that policies and evidence are easily accessible to compliance teams and auditors. It ensures documents are securely stored, preventing unauthorized access, and version control is automatically managed, which keeps the records up to date. Using a GRC platform like Easy Audit, for example, makes this process seamless. Instead of tracking multiple files manually, a tool like Easy Audit can automatically organize your policies, controls, and evidence in a single location. It enforces access controls so only authorized users can make edits and provides real-time updates on policy reviews, approvals, and changes. Many companies still rely on shared drives, spreadsheets, or scattered files, which leads to versioning issues and security risks. A GRC tool eliminates this problem by providing a structured system that auditors can quickly navigate. Your next option is a file naming and version control system. Now, if you don't have a GRC tool and are doing this manually, you probably want to use a proper naming convention. This makes it easier to track documents, know which version is current, and avoid confusion. A standard file naming format should include the policy type, for example, access management or incident response. It should have the version number, so like V1.3 or V2.0, and the review dates. By keeping all these files labeled consistently, your team can quickly find the most up-to-date versions without digging through multiple drafts. And on top of that, your documents should be stored in a clearly labeled folder based on categories like security policies, for example, so all the policies we just discussed, operational policies, so change management, vendor management, that kind of thing, and evidence logs, so access reviews, backup logs, risk assessments. Following this system ensures everyone knows where to find documents without wasting time searching. Now, keeping track of document updates is also critical for compliance. Auditors have to see when policies were last reviewed or modified, who made the changes, and why the changes were made. Every SOC 2 document should include a version history and change log at the top of the file. This creates a clear audit trail for policy updates. With a structured change log, auditors can easily track policy updates and confirm that compliance is being actively maintained. To simplify this process, Easy Audit automatically tracks policy changes, approvals, and updates, eliminating the need for manual version tracking. Next, I'm going to break down how to collect and manage SOC 2 audit evidence to ensure a smooth compliance process. Auditors want to see real, verifiable proof that your policies and procedures are in place and being followed consistently. Here's what type of evidence you need, how to collect it efficiently, and how long you need to retain it. Your SOC 2 auditor will look for different types of evidence to verify compliance. The most common categories include logs, so access control logs that track who accessed sensitive systems when and what actions they took, backup logs, which show regular data backups and successful restores, and update logs, which record system updates, patches, changes and security changes. The next type is screenshots, which are used to visually confirm configurations such as multi-factor authentication settings, role-based access permissions, and firewall rules and encryption settings. The third is policies, right? So written policies that define security, operations, and compliance rules. And examples of this are the policies we just discussed. So access management, incident response, data retention, vendor security. These should be signed, dated, and regularly updated. The fourth is reports. So risk assessments that identify security risks and how they're mitigated. Security tests, so evidence of penetration testing, vulnerability scans, and security audits. And vendor compliance reports. So any third-party security assessments like SOC 2 reports, your ISO 27001 certification. Without proper documentation, auditors might reject your compliance claims, which leads to delays and outright compliance failure. Now, I want to cover the best methods for collecting evidence because SOC 2 requires companies to collect evidence on an ongoing basis, not just before the audit. The best way to do this is by combining automation with structured manual processes. Automated tools can collect and store evidence in real time, which reduces your manual work and ensures accuracy. Popular solutions for this include AWS CloudTrail, which logs all actions in AWS environments, or Datadog, which monitors system activity and alerts for anomalies. Automating evidence collection means logs are captured instantly and stored securely. There's no risk of human error in documentation, and the evidence is always up to date when auditors request it. Now, not all evidence can be automated. Some processes require manual documentation and periodic reviews. These include quarterly access reviews, which are, verifying user permissions manually, security awareness training logs, which track employee training completions, and incident response drills, which document security testing scenarios. For manual processes, teams should follow a clear checklist to ensure all necessary evidence is collected and stored properly. A hybrid approach, which is using automation for system-generated evidence and manual checklists for human-controlled actions, ensures compliance is consistent, complete, and easy to verify. Now, for a SOC 2 Type 2, companies must retain evidence for at least 3 to 12 months to prove that security controls are operating consistently. For SOC 2 Type 2, companies must retain evidence for at least 3 to 12 months, depending on your audit period, to prove that security controls are operating consistently. This means access control logs, right? So store records for at least 1 year with quarterly reviews. Backup logs, I would say to keep at least 3 to 12 months of backups and proof of successful restores. Security training logs, where you should retain employee training records for at least 1 year. And incident response reports, where you should keep reports for 1 to 2 years depending on the severity of the incidents. For example, let's say a company conducts quarterly access reviews to ensure employees only have permissions they need. For SOC 2, that company has to store all 4 quarterly reports for a full year as proof of compliance. Retention isn't just about keeping records, it's about keeping them organized. Without a structured approach, it's easy to lose track of evidence, making audits more difficult than they need to be. The best practices for evidence retention is to use a cloud-based system like Easy Audit to automatically store and categorize your evidence, to label files properly so older versions can be easily referenced if needed, and to schedule regular cleanups to remove outdated evidence once the retention period expires. By maintaining well-organized, easily accessible evidence, your audit process will be smoother, faster, and less stressful. Next, we'll cover the most common mistakes companies make with SOC 2 compliance and how to avoid them. Many companies fail their audits because they overlook critical requirements, assume they can fix issues last minute, or rely too much on manual processes that aren't scalable. So here are the 3 most common mistakes that cause SOC 2 compliance failures and how to avoid them. The first is missing key documents. One of the biggest reasons companies fail their SOC 2 audits is missing required documentation. Auditors have a checklist of key documents that they expect to see, and even if one is missing, the audit gets delayed or worse, fails. Here's what auditors will check first. They'll check your access control policy, which defines who has access to sensitive data and systems, your incident response policy, which details how your company detects, responds to, and recovers from security incidents, your data retention policy, which specifies how long data is stored and how it's accurately deleted, and your risk assessments and vendor compliance reports, which show that your company actively identifies and mitigates risks. Without these documents, auditors can't verify compliance, and your company is forced into a lengthy back-and-forth process to create last-minute policies. SOC 2 isn't just about having policies. It's about proving you actually follow them. Companies fail their audits because evidence doesn't match their policies or because they don't maintain consistent records over time. So I'll give you the most common evidence gaps that cause compliance failures. First is when your logs don't align with policy timelines. So for example, your access control policy states that permissions are reviewed quarterly, but your logs show that access reviews were skipped for 6 months. Auditors are going to see this as a compliance failure even if your policy is written correctly. Next is missing or outdated access logs. because auditors are going to expect to see a clear audit trail of logins, approvals, and permission changes. If logs are missing or inconsistent, your audit could be flagged as incomplete. Then you have unverified vendor compliance. If your vendor management policy requires third-party audits, but you don't have up-to-date security reports from vendors, you could fail compliance for third-party security risks. Now here's how to prevent those evidence failures. First, you want to automatically log collection with tools like AWS CloudTrail to ensure logs are updated in real time. Then you want to set up scheduled reviews for quarterly access checks and incident reporting. And you also want to use cloud-based evidence storage to ensure nothing is lost or outdated before the audit. The more organized, consistent, and automated your evidence collection is, the smoother your audit will be. Now, one of the biggest mistakes companies make is trying to manage SOC 2 compliance manually. Compliance requires constant updates, evidence collection, and documentation, which is a massive workload that drains resources and leads to human error. Manual compliance fails because it's time-consuming, right? Manually collecting logs, updating policies, and tracking access changes takes hundreds of hours each year. It's also error-prone, right? Manually maintaining records are more likely to have gaps, inconsistencies, or missing updates, and it's inefficient at scale. As your company grows, compliance needs to expand exponentially, which makes your manual tracking unsustainable. Now, here's how AI solves these problems. First, it automates evidence collection. AI-powered tools like Easy Audit can track logins, backups, and security incidents in real time. It also auto-generates policies and updates. Instead of manually writing and updating documents, AI can create customized SOC 2 policies that stay aligned with regulatory standards. And lastly, it keeps everything audit-ready. AI ensures that compliance data is always up to date, so there's no last-minute scramble before an audit. Companies that rely on outdated manual compliance methods are at a higher risk of audit failure due to missing records, inconsistencies, and human errors. By integrating AI into compliance workflows, companies can cut compliance time in half, reduce costs, and improve their accuracy. Now let's explore how AI can take over the most tedious parts of SOC 2 compliance so that you can save time and reduce the stress of having an audit. SOC 2 compliance is a massive administrative burden for most companies. Keeping documentation updated, collecting evidence, and ensuring audit readiness takes hundreds of hours each year, which is time that could be spent growing the business. This is where AI-driven compliance automation changes the game. AI can track, update, and organize SOC 2 documentation automatically, which reduces the manual work and makes compliance faster and more reliable. One of the most time-consuming aspects of SOC 2 compliance is evidence collection. Companies need proof that they follow their security policies, which means tracking who accessed what systems and when, so these are your access logs, when security updates and patches were applied, so your update logs, and whether backups were successfully created and stored, right? So these are your backup logs. Manually collecting this data is prone to human error, missing records, and last-minute scrambling before an audit. Here's how AI changes this. Firstly, you're getting automated tracking of logins, backups, and security events. You're getting real-time alerts for non-compliance issues. For example, a missed access review will flag an alert so you know it happened, and you get instant evidence storage in a centralized system that is ready for auditors. For example, Easy Audit continuously tracks security logs, monitors compliance events, and automatically stores evidence in an audit-ready format. Instead of spending weeks preparing for an audit, companies using AI-powered compliance tools like Easy Audit can generate reports in minutes. SOC 2 requires a set of security policies that align with the company's infrastructure and operations. Many companies either copy generic templates, which don't match their actual real-life processes, or spend weeks manually drafting policies. AI can generate these policies in seconds. Instead of forcing companies to write policies from scratch, AI-driven platforms like Easy Audit can just ask a few key questions about your company's security setup. Instead of forcing you to write policies from scratch, Easy Audit will ask you a few key questions about how your company's security setup works, and it'll use that information to automatically generate policies tailored to your company. Then, it'll keep those policies updated automatically as systems and compliance requirements change. For example, if a company migrates to the cloud, AI can automatically adjust the data retention policy to reflect new storage practices. By using AI-generated policies, companies eliminate compliance guesswork, reduce the risk of missing key requirements, and ensure documentation always aligns with real-world security controls. Now, one of the biggest reasons companies struggle with SOC 2 audits is disorganized documents. Policies, logs, and compliance records are often scattered across different tools and folders, making it difficult to find the right files when auditors request them. AI automates documentation management. It centralizes centralizes all your SOC 2 documents, logs, and reports in one secure location. It automatically categorizes files by policy type, version history, and compliance requirements, and it provides a real-time compliance dashboard that shows you which documents are up to date and what needs attention. For example, Easy Audit automatically tags, sorts, and updates documentation that ensures every policy and log is audit-ready at all times. Instead of manually managing compliance folders and spreadsheets, AI-powered documentation tools keep everything secure, accessible, and up to date, so that your company is always prepared for an audit without the extra work. AI is the future of SOC 2 compliance because it eliminates manual tracking, it keeps policies up to date, and it ensures audit readiness. With AI, SOC 2 compliance becomes a seamless, automated process, allowing companies to focus on scaling their business instead of managing paperwork. So if your company is trying to get SOC 2 compliant without overspending, there are smarter ways to do it. So in the next video, I'm going to break down the most cost-effective strategies, common mistakes to avoid, and how to streamline compliance without draining your resources. So click here to watch that. I'll see you in the next one.